Hi and welcome to this tutorial for Unreal Engine 4. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at the process of creating a master material for use in our projects. This master material will have a host of functionality in it which we can then go and access through the power of material instancing. What we're going to have a look at building is something very similar to this master material that I have in front of me here, albeit quite a simple one. It has a whole host of functionality in it which we can then go and access through the power of what are called material instances. We're going to go into this in a little bit more detail as we go through this tutorial. I'm going to talk you through the process of building your own master material and then having a look at creating material instances which you can quickly go and make changes in your scene using. So for example, this example I have in front of me here is for this medical deck scene here. The entire scene is utilising this single master material that we have here. And what I've then done is created in material instances from that master material, which are then utilised throughout the scene. So for example, I have the material instance here for this panel right here with these lights on. And what it means is that I can access a whole host of functionality from my master material and make changes very quickly and very simply through material instancing. So say for example, if I wanted to, I could change the colour of the lights on the front of this panel here. So I could come in here, I could make these lights, let's say, some kind of pinky kind of purpley colour. And then I could also affect the brightness of those as well. And then as soon as I save that, that change is utilised throughout the entire scene. Quite a lot of lens flare going on there, so I'm just going to reduce the value back down again. But you can see that it's very easy to make changes to your material instances very quickly once you have built this robust master material. So throughout this tutorial we're going to take a look at the process of creating a master material which you could then utilise in your own projects, and you can expand upon as you see fit for your projects. So hopefully this tutorial will be really useful for you. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm actually just going to create a new project so that we can start to have a bit of a play about with building master material. So I'm just going to call this master material tutorial. Just call it master material tut. I'm just going to add with starter content, so we've got some content that we can use. I'm actually going to build some other bits and bobs in here so that we can, for visualizing our master material as we go through and create it. So I'm just going to make sure it's on maximum quality. I'm just going to create a first person project will be fine for what we want to do. And what we're going to the first thing we're going to have a look at doing is we're actually going to have a look at starting to build the actual master material itself, and I'm just going to talk through some general points with regards to creation. So let's have a look over in here. So first thing I'm going to do inside my content folder, I'm just going to create a new folder in here called materials. And then I'm going to, within that materials folder, I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call that master material, just so we've got that's separate. I'm going to right click inside of here and I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this general master material, master underscore mat actually. So we've got some naming conventions going on. I'm just going to open that up. Okay, so just a little bit of a word about this. So master materials, when you're using them in your scene, you can have a multitude of these for different purposes really. So for example, I mean this one's kind of going to be kind of a general master material that we could utilize for all kinds of objects in our scene. But you're going to see as we go through this, we're going to add functionality inside this material, as you would do with any, for different effects that we would like applied to our end result for our material. So say for example, if we wanted to have some glass with an extra refraction on it, and so it's looking really sweet and got a really nice end result for as a glass material, we might not do that inside of this material. We might do that in a separate one, which we could then add as a separate material ID or something like that on our object later on down the line. So we're going to add start off by adding simple functionality into this. So we're going to have a look at adding in things like a normal map, or a kind of main normal map, which might be either like a tileable normal or like a corrective normal that might be put onto an object. We're going to have a look at adding like a diffuse, like an albedo color in here, as well as metallic and roughness. And we're also going to have a look at dealing with emissive. So those are the threads that we're going to have a look at initially. So let's see about how we can go and start to build that. So with that said, let's get going. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is have a look at creating our functionality to start going into this material. So I'm going to have a look at building a few simple threads in here. So we're going to have a look at building like an albedo or diffuse section. We're going to have a look at building a roughness, a metallic, emissive, normal, and a way of getting ambient occlusion onto material as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need some, because the textures that we're actually going to add for this, the textures which are going to be used for materials if we were working on a project in a scene, won't actually be dealt with directly inside the master material. We'll add those textures in our material instances once we expose them. What we're going to need is we're going to need some placeholder textures just to put in here, just to plug in here as inputs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new texture. So I'm going to have a 128 by 128 image here. I'm going to make this one a black one to begin with. I'm going to save it. I'm going to put it into my master materials folder, and I'm going to call this black placeholder. I'm just going to save that out. I'm going to, sorry, just going to change my colour quickly to a white. I'm just going to save that out as well. So file, let's get that saved out as well. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to put an alpha channel in this one as well, just in case I actually want to have any of my images have an alpha channel and was fierce to use that. So I'm just going to quickly save as, I'm going to call this white placeholder alpha. I might end up using all of these, but it could be, they might be quite useful for putting in as placeholders for when we're building the material. And this will become apparent as we go on through this tutorial. So I'm just going to quickly create a neutral, a kind of flat normal map color here as well. So 128 by 128, 255. I'm just going to fill that. We'll just call this normal placeholder. Save that out as well. Okay, so now I've got some textures that I can work with as well. So I've got my master material here, which is completely bare at the moment. First thing I'm going to do as well here is I'm just going to right click, create a new folder. I'm going to call this textures, and then I'm just going to find my folder for which I've just saved those few textures into, which was just on my desktop. I'm just going to grab these. I'm just going to quickly import these in, just so we've got those to work with in my material. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at building the section for our color here, so our albedo. So I'm just going to grab this white placeholder alpha here. I'm just going to hold T. I'm just going to click, and that will bring our texture sample in. Another way of doing it is just to drag and drop that into our material, and then I'm going to have a look at bringing in the normal. So I'm just going to grab this one. I'm just going to hold T and click again. I'm just going to double check this is actually imported as a normal map, which it has done, which is awesome. I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to add in. I'll start to add in some functionality for this for the normal map. So we'll start with the normal maps actually. So we're going to have two types of normal maps. We're going to have our kind of main normal map, which will deal with any kind of corrective elements, or alternatively like a tileable normal map. And then we're going to have a separate section which will deal with detail normals. So I'm just going to Control W that just to duplicate it. I'm going to grab a multiply node. I'm going to duplicate that as well. And then I'm going to create a 3 vector for each of these. So the quickest way to do that, just to go through that again actually, just so it's quick for people. If you want to create a multiply node, hold M on your keyboard and click. That will create some multiply nodes for you. Hold 3 on your keyboard to create 3 vectors. Or alternatively for these, you could just type in, right click and do the usual business and type multiply in here. Or type 3 and get a constant 3 vector. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in my normal map into A here, and my 3 vector into B for all of these. I'm just going to arrange these just to make it a little neater. And then I'm just going to add those together, and that's going to become our normal map information, which will drive our normals. Now this is where we first start to put in our functionality, which will be exposed in our material instances. So this top one here, which is going to be our main normal map. If you right click on this and then convert to parameter, we can give this a name now. So the name we're going to give this is main normal input. And then you can see here the parameter name has changed on the left. I'm then going to change this name over here to normal normals and hit enter. So we've now got this normal main normal input, which is in the category, the group of normals. And what this section here will mean a lot more in a moment when I move on to my next one to create or convert it to a parameter. So with this one here, this 3 vector, I'm going to just give this a value. So I'm going to come into here and I'm just going to give this a value of 1, 1, and 0.9 initially. This is just so that we can overdrive our normal map at some point and get a little bit more depth information out of this if we need to. Ideally with this value, this in the blue channel, you don't really want to drive this any lower than, I would say, probably about 0.8, 0.7. You might start to get problems after that. I mean, feel free to experiment. But yeah, that's my personal experience. I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to convert this to a parameter. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this main normal strength. And then in the group, you'll see now that we have this normals here, which is what the group that we just gave this main normal map input. So I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to give that normals. Again, I'm just going to move some of this stuff around. Right click on this one, converts parameter. I'm going to call this one detail normal input. And again, going to change this over to normals. Right click this one, converts parameter. I'm going to call this one detail normal strength. And again, give this a category of normals. What I'm then going to do is I'm just going to comment this out for a moment. So I'm going to select all this and hit C. I'm going to call this normal maps. And then we've got this whole comment box which we can move around now. And then we can come and have a look at building some more functionality in just a moment. But what I want to show you first is what this means. So we've just added some names. We've got 4 kind of named parts of our material here, which have all got groups. If you imagine groups to be like folders, it's probably the best way to think of it. So it's like a category of what you want to expose in your material instance. So you just give it a name and then you can categorize all these things into the same name. So if I just come in here and go back to my master material, I'm just going to save everything first. So if I just save this, I'll be able to jump back in here. I'll right click on this general master material. I'm going to go create material instance. I'm going to call this test _mat inst. Okay. And I can open this up. Now what will be interesting in here is you'll be able to see that now in my parameter groups I have this here, which is normals, which is the groups we just added for these nodes in here, and then we have all of those named parameters which we name. So main normal input, detail normal input, detail normal strength, all of those are available in here, and you can access those now as part of your material instance. You can affect those in kind of real time as well, so it's really powerful. So what we're going to do is just going to close that for a moment, and we're going to continue to build our functionality into here. So we have our texture sample, which is going to deal with our diffuse in here, our albedo. That I'm pretty much just going to plug straight into our base color just for now. The other thing we're going to do is have a look, because this has an alpha channel which we created when we created that image in Photoshop. We can actually use this part for emissive color as well, so for actually driving our emissive. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a few additional nodes for us to work with in here. So I'm going to take this node here, and I'm going to multiply this by a few things. So I'm going to create a multiply node. This is going to be our 3 vectors to deal with our color. So this will deal with the color of our emissive here. And then we're going to multiply this again, I think, which will be our strength. So I'm just going to make that a constant. So that will be the strength for our color, and that will go into here in just a moment. So this is our alpha, which is going to determine this is our alpha, which will be determining the areas that we would like to be emissive. We will then be able to determine the color of the emissive if we want to, and then this will also drive the power right there. We can plug that into emissive color then. So this will be all of our emissive functionality. And what we can do is we can right click on this, and we can give this convert to parameter. We can call this emissive color, and then in the group we can call that emissive. And then with this section here, we can right click on this, convert this to a parameter. We could call this one emissive power, and then we can select in here emissive, and then that's all good. Just going to marquee select these, go comment them, call them emissive, and then we've got some functionality in here now. So what I'm actually going to do with this this texture actually quickly that I was working with before, this white one with the alpha, I'm just going to grab a brush really quickly. I'm just going to paint into my alpha a smiley face, just so that we can demonstrate some of this stuff. So I'm just going to grab all of this again. So I'm just going to file, save as, save that out again. Make sure it takes the alpha channel with it. And I'm just going to re-import this. I'll just double check that that alpha channel has come over with it, which it has done. That's cool. So that means that we can now have a check in a moment in our material instance to see whether or not we're starting to affect some of these values. So I'm just going to quickly save my master material. And then I'm just going to open up my test material instance here. And you can now see we've got emissive color, which we could come in and affect. And we can also change our emissive power here. So just make that into a box. So now you can see that we now have this the ability in here now to create an emissive color, which we can kind of change on the fly to whatever color we want, and have like kind of a little smiley face disco going on. And we can also change the power on that as well, and we can turn those off and on as we see fit. So we've now got emissive and normals in there. So that's quite enough just for this part of the tutorial. So I will be back in a moment to carry on with this, and we can continue to add functionality. Okay, so what we're going to have a look at doing now is adding some more functionality to our master material. So we're actually going to have a look at the process of adding roughness map, metallic and ambient occlusion in here. So just in Photoshop, I need to create another placeholder texture so that we can create an image which will drive, or a texture which will drive all of that content. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a look inside of Photoshop again. I'm just going to create another placeholder texture. So we're going to call this one's going to be a 256 by 256. And what we're going to do is we're going to have multiple maps in a single image. So I've heard this referred to as multiple different names. So one was like merge maps, one is like mask maps, but lots of different names for it, but it's all the same thing. What we're going to be doing is having our roughness in our red channel. We're going to have our metallic in our green, and we're going to have our ambient occlusion in our green channel. It doesn't matter really which channels those maps go into. It's entirely up to you and what you've been doing on your project. But what we're going to do initially is I'm just going to, for visualization rather than more than anything else, I'm just going to quickly change this over to my color to be black. I'm just going to create just some text in here. So I'm going to put an R in here for roughness initially. I'm just going to move that into the center. I'm going to go to my green channel now, deselect that, create another one, put an M in here, capital M, for metallic, or metalness should I say. And then in my blue, I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to put AO in there for ambient occlusion. And then what we'll be able to do is I'm just going to position that kind of in the middle as well. And then what the final result should look like is something like this. So when you're working on your own projects and you're working away and you've been generating your roughness, what you'll do is transfer that, because it'll be a grayscale image, into the red channel. And then same thing for your mask for your metalness, you'll put that into the green channel. And then any baked ambient occlusion from, I don't know, 3D Studio Max or XNormal or whatever it is that you, ZBrush, whatever it is that you've been baking that stuff out in, you can put that into the blue channel. And then what you'll end up is with this kind of psychedelic looking image like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this out as, I'm going to call this, merge placeholder like this. I'm just going to click save. And then I'm just going to import this into Unreal. So in here, I'm just going to into my textures folder, just going to find where I put those textures, and I'm just going to grab this merge placeholder here, and I'm going to drag this in. Now, there's an important step with this. So if you've got any form of grayscale information in one of these types of files where you've put multiple maps into a single texture, there is a little tick box over here called sRGB. You should uncheck this if you're using alpha channels individually as masks. So what this will do is it will mean that you will get an accurate representation of what those maps are attempting to do for you. If you uncheck this box, make sure you uncheck it before you do anything. You can get broken references and all kinds of things going on in your materials if you do it afterwards and you've already implemented it into a material. It's not a big change or a big fix to sort out, but just something to be aware of. So make sure you uncheck that if you're intending to use a map like this. What I'm then going to do is go back to my my master material here with that merge placeholder selected. I'm just going to come in here. I'm just going to move some stuff around actually. Just so I've got a little bit more space. I'm just going to hold T on my keyboard and click to bring this in. And what this means now is that it means that I can have a look at starting to utilize this map here for multiple purposes because it contains loads of information. What the simplest one for us to work with is obviously the ambient occlusion. We can take the blue channel and we can plug that straight in to our ambient occlusion because there isn't really anything else that we need to do with that. Apart from, if you're intending to have flexibility with this, like if you want to eventually change, or you know which channels you use for which type of map, one of the things that you might want to have in here is you might want to have a mask, like a component mask in here, like this. So that what you can do is, if I plug that in here, you can add the blue channel as a default, and you could say convert this to a parameter. We could call this ambient occlusion selection. Like so, and then I could give this a new name, call this ambient occlusion, like that. And then what that means is we can come back in here, and as I change these different, sorry, if I connect that properly, actually out of the top of the texture sample there, as I change these checkboxes, you can see that it's choosing different channels then within that image for your ambient occlusion. So say for example, like with this one in Photoshop, we've given ambient occlusion the blue channel. If we wanted to change that over to say like our red channel, our green or our blue, you could come back in here and you can change that around and do as you will with this later on. So it's quite powerful. So I'll make that the blue channel for now. The next thing we want to have a look at is adding in our functionality again. So I'm just going to come in. I'm going to add in another component mask actually. This one, I'm going to convert to a parameter as well. We're going to call this metalness selection, and then I'm going to call this metal in here, metalness even, and then what I'm going to do again is push that into here, and by default I'm going to make that my green channel because we know that that's what that is, and then all we need to do is connect that into our metallic because we know that that's going to be all right. So we know that that's going to be pretty much everything on this surface is going to be metal apart from the M in this case. So now the only one that's left to deal with is roughness. So I'm just going to push that down there. I'm going to again come out of here. I'm going to have a component mask. Let me get the right node. Grab another component mask here. Right click, convert this to a parameter. I'm going to call this one roughness selection. And then in our group, we'll call this one roughness again. And then what I'm going to do is make the default a red channel in here. I also need to make this, I need to parameterize this here. So right click on here, and I'm going to convert this to a parameter, and we're going to call this merge map selection, like so, or merge map input actually. So we can choose that. I'm going to give this one, just call this one merge input. That'll do for now. And then what we've got here is our roughness, which we can go play about with. Now there's going to be one general roughness for this, but if you were dealing with like having a overall normal map and or like a kind of main normal map and also a detailed normal map, you probably want to have some kind of blend of roughness so that you could have some of that micro, or that really some of that small detail from that normal map maybe reflected in roughness as well if you wanted to. But just for this tutorial here, we're just going to have a look now at creating like an additional system just for a single thread of roughness in here. So I'm just going to come out of here and I'm going to type alert for a linear interpolate. Just going to deconnect that, I'll break that quickly. I'm just going to stick that into the alpha there. I'm going to create two constants. This is so that we can have something to drive, or so that we can affect our roughness values. I'm going to plug this straight into roughness. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to want to parameterize these two here. So I'm going to right click, convert to a parameter. I'm going to call this roughness min. Grab this one here, let's parameter, and call this one roughness max. I'm going to put some default values in for these, so I'm going to put this one as 0.1 and this one at 0.9. So what I can do now is give these both a category here, or a group, and this one will be roughness, and this one will be roughness as well. And then what we've got here is a control which we can use inside of our material instance, which I'll come back to in a moment when we start to put some texture content in. So let's just pop this over here. Okay, so this one here, this here, we'll comment that out, we'll call that roughness. Just going to move some of this around, so I'm going to comment that as well, call that ambient occlusion. Just going to push this out to the back over here, drop this ambient occlusion down a touch. Drop this roughness over here and comment that as well, call that metalness. Okay, and then we've got multiple threads now of functionality in here. So what I'll do is I'll come back to this in just a moment so that we can have a look at extending this functionality further for adding in things like a control for tiling, and a few other elements. Then we'll test it by bringing some maps in and plugging that into our material instance and seeing what the final result looks like, and talk through what functionality is in there and how you could continue to utilize that and expand on this for your projects. Okay, so let's continue to have a look at how we can expand the functionality of this master material here. The next thing we're going to have a look at doing is adding in some functionality for how we will control tiling in here. So there's multiple sections in here where we might want to have a uniform tile, so how we could, say for example, if we were working with a tileable texture, say like a brick wall or something like that we might want to have tile across a surface. We're going to want to have some ability to, through our material instance, set how much tiling we would actually like to have across a surface. And that will be for everything from albedo through to its kind of main normal map, if you like, the corrective or tiling normal map. And then you've also got this section down here, which will probably want to have its own unique tiling, which is the detail normals. So there's a way that we can go about doing that. First thing we're going to want to have a look at doing is grabbing a 3 vector, and we're going to call this, we're going to create a parameter. I'm going to call this main tiling. We're going to give this a whole new group. We're going to call this tiling settings. Okay, like that. And what we're going to want to do, excuse me, is we're going to have a look at setting up this to push, as I say, those areas here. So the best way to do this, or the most logical way, I would probably assume, is to, you'd probably come in here and you'd have a look for a texture coordinate node like this, and you're kind of halfway to figuring out how to do this. The other way of doing it, or the way to get this to actually work, is actually to use, again, our friend component mask, which we've been using an awful lot throughout this tutorial. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these two nodes here and we're going to multiply them. So we're going to take a component mask of R and G, which in turn is actually going to translate to the tiling of U and V here. And we're going to want to plug this into here, and then this one into here. What we can now do with this result is we can actually plug this into multiple sources now. So this is going to plug into our main texture sample here for things like our our main kind of diffuse texture, which we actually need to parameterize. So I'm just going to do that actually. So I'm just going to convert that to a parameter. I'm going to call this albedo texture. Put this in albedo. So we've got that, and then we can come on and add some more functionality into that in a while if we want to. The other thing we're going to want to have a look at doing is plugging this into here, so that we can power the tiling on this section as well, and then once more into our normal map down there. And what we can then do is we can actually grab this stuff and duplicate it for our tiling settings for our detail normal map. And I'm going to call this detail tiling, so I'm just going to make a change to the name here, and I'm going to plug this straight into here. I can then comment this, so I can call this detail tiling, and then we could grab this section here as well, and we could call this main tiling or something along those lines, and that will work a treat. So let's just make sure we actually get some values set up in this as well. So I'm going to give this a value of, so I'm just going to set this to 1 and to 1 here, so that we've got, a tile of 1 on 1 on here. I'm going to do the same with this as well. So we've actually got some defaults in here. The other thing I noticed was I set up my normal strength here for this main normal map, but I didn't actually do one down here for this. So I'm going to set this to 1, 1, and 0.9, like I did with the other node up there. And then that's pretty much all the functionality in for tiling. So there's not a huge amount left to do with this for a basic kind of master material for us to get into this. So what we're going to want to do in a moment is come back in a second and have a look at how we can actually test this and make sure that this is working as we hope. So in a second I shall come back and we will carry on with this tutorial. Okay, so let's have a look at testing out this master material that we've created here. So let's have a look at going and creating a new material instance, and then we can bring in some texture content to test with that. So I've got some here in a folder called sci-fi that I'm just going to have a go at, which was from the scene that I showed off at the start of the video, just to see whether or not this stuff's going to work as we would expect. So in my textures folder, I'm just going to add a new folder. I'm going to call it sci-fi, and then I'm just going to quickly add in these maps here, just so that I can give these a test. I'll give them a save as well in a moment. That might take a minute. So I'm just going to right click and I'm actually going to save all, so I may as well save everything at the same time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just looking to have a look at testing this master material to see whether or not all the functionality that we have implemented inside there is actually functional, so that if we wanted to start extending this and adding new stuff, then we could do, and that we aren't, if there are problems, we are adding to them later on down the line. So let's just give this a moment to save, and then we will carry on. Okay, awesome. So let's just have a quick look here. So I'm just going to right click on here. I'm going to create a material instance, and I'm going to call this panel test underscore mat inst. I'm just going to move this into the main materials folder. I'm just going to open that up. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is have a look in, just make sure everything that we want is actually in here. So everything is pretty much inside of all these parameters are all in here that we added inside the master material. So what I'm going to do now is just go into my sci-fi folder. I'm going to grab my albedo, turn the albedo on here. I'm going to add that in here, and you can now see that that is now present in the material instance. I'm going to do the same thing with the normals. So we'll go in and find our main normal map input, add that in there. You can see now that we've got some normal map information. And the next one's going to be this this merge map here. And we're going to go and find that in here, tick that on, and then add that in. And you can see that everything is very metallic at the moment and very shiny. And what we're actually going to want to have a look at doing now is having a look affecting the roughness in the scene. So I'm going to have a look at this roughness min and max here. So I'm actually going to change these values around in here to see what we can get this, how we can get this to work. And you can see now that we can start to change some of these roughness values on the fly, which is really powerful. So we can start to come in here and play about with. Maybe change these values around again. Maybe I had them the right way around to begin with. So yeah, we can come in here now and we can start to affect the way that this mesh is, this material is displayed just by sliding these values around. And that's really powerful because it means that if you're an artist and you're working on a project, then you've got the ability to come back in here and make some changes to your roughness without having to go back out to Photoshop potentially, which is really nice. So that is working. Everything that we wanted is pretty much in there working. So you can see here we've got all our scratches from our roughness map in here, and it's also looking quite metallic because of the map is obviously picking that up. The only other thing we could test is our emissive, because obviously we've got an emissive in this texture as well. So let's see if we can just hunt down emissive in this list. Okay, so I'm just going to pick that out, and I'm actually going to make this like a red light, I think, this time. So a red light, yeah. And then I'm going to come to emissive power, and as I ramp that up, you can now see that we have a red light in here, or we can affect the light color. I mean, if you wanted to as well, we could probably pick a nice blue color to match it, and come back in here and drop the emissive value a touch, and you can see now that that's working and that's all fine. So all of our functionality that we'd added from our master material is now working in here. Now the other thing was as well, if you remember, the last thing that we added to the master material was all this functionality in here for the tiling. So I'm just going to scroll down in here, and I'm actually going to have a look for my main tiling. I'm going to come in here and I'm actually going to increase this. So I'll give this a value of 5, and you can see now that we can use this to tile our textures if needs be. So it's really powerful. You get the whole purpose of this process of creating a master material and then utilizing these values in your material instances. It gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to work very quickly. So if you're working on, say, a new asset for your portfolio, or you're working on something for your project, it means if you've got a master material that you've set up and that you're using regularly, then you can come in and just put content into here quickly and have a look and see how it works. There is an onus on that you get this right in the first place, but you can definitely get a very simple one set up to help you work quickly, so you don't just have to keep on, not even just copying and pasting these nodes into lots of different types of materials. You can just create new material instances instead to do that. So the other thing I want to do just quickly is just going to have a look at testing this with some of the content from the starter pack, to see if we can have a look at producing, like, I don't know, something a bit different. So maybe like a clay wall or something like that with this master material. So once again, the same workflow is going to apply. I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to right click on my master material. I'm going to go to create material instance. I'm going to call this clay brick _matte inst. I'm just going to drag that into the main materials folder and click move here. Going to open that up, and then I can come and find my texture content. We'll start with the color. Pop that in here. There we go. And then pop back in here and find the mass map. Pop that in there. And then we need to find our normal map. So we can come back down and find our main normal, or not, where's it gone, main normal map. Pop that in there, and you can see that's now working. And what we could then do is have a look at, obviously, having a look at our roughness min and roughness max, and you can see now that we can change the roughness on these bricks really quickly. It's just clamping the values really, and just changing the values and how they're displayed really. But it just gives you a little bit of flexibility. Obviously got no metallic in this one, which is great because it's a brick wall. But the one thing we don't have is any detail normals. So we could now have a look at, and this is isn't exactly ideal for what we're looking to do, but if I just type in here detail, you'll see that there's this rocky detail normal map, and I can just show you how this works. So we could now say, oh, okay, well, we want a detail normal map as an overlay, so we end up with something that looks a little bit like that. But that's obviously, you know, far too over the top. But we might want to have this normal, this noisy normal map running across our model. So obviously this time we could come in here and affect our tiling in this section. So probably put in a value of like 7, not 773. That's a little bit over the top. And you can see now that this, you can tile this across your mesh quite easily. As a little bit of surface noise if you want to, or alternatively you can just, you know, turn that off again, maybe affect the tiling on your main section. So we could make this like tile twice as much very easily. And this means that you get this flexibility with creating your materials much quicker than if you were working with your regular workflow. So you have to put quite a bit of work into this section to begin with. And as I say, this is very basic. You could do master materials or materials that include things such as the behavior for glass. You could have things for subsurface scattering. You could have a section here for vertex painting. You could have a section here for all kinds of things. I mean, you're probably going to want to break these down into smaller master materials, I would say, that you could probably reuse. But that's the general principle of how this works. Hopefully this has been useful for you, and you've been able to get something from this tutorial that you can apply to your own projects. And I hope that you have enjoyed watching, and thank you very much. And I hope you come back to watch another one in the future. Thanks. Bye.